Hey everyone, welcome back. And a friendly reminder, if you could, to give this video a thumbs up if you like it and you find it helpful. And please do hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. So what's the question on this video? This is one that some folks have been sending in, which is, what's the difference between the depression that we witness in narcissistic abuse and regular clinical depression? It's actually a really, really great question that was sent in more than once, and one that is important for anyone experiencing narcissistic abuse to be aware of. As always, if you are experiencing symptoms of depression, it's really important that you seek out health care for that right away. Let's start, though, with what traditional clinical depression is. An episode of major depression is characterized by sad or irritable mood, or a loss of pleasure in activities that were typically enjoyable to a person, and that has to happen for at least 2 weeks, but for most people usually it's a lot longer. In addition, other patterns that we see in clinical depression include changes, typically a loss of appetite, changes and disruptions in sleep, feelings of worthlessness, feelings of guilt, suicidal thoughts or suicidal behaviors. People experience themselves as almost like moving slower than usual, a chronic state of fatigue, a loss of energy, tearfulness, difficulties with concentration, and chronic thoughts of death. 2 weeks is a long time, at a minimum, to feel this way, and that's the minimum criterion to be diagnosed with depression. And if a person is depressed, nothing snaps them out of it. No funny movie, no big smile from your child, no promotion, no funny joke, no gift, nothing. The word depression obviously has the clinical meaning and clinical definition I just shared. But in regular conversation, we often take it to mean sadness, low energy, hopelessness, and sort of almost experiencing the world in a sense of gray. It's not unusual for people experiencing narcissistic abuse to experience lots of patterns that we see in depression, particularly sadness, that thing called anhedonia, that loss of pleasure in activities that once you did like to do, the appetite and the sleep changes, the sense of worthlessness, the sense of guilt, the low energy, the tearfulness, the concentration problems. So you may be wondering, kind of just gave me the same list there, Dr. Ramani. What's the difference? And if you already know the answer to what the difference is between clinical depression and then sort of the depression we see in narcissistic abuse, drop it in the comments. So there are 2 possible scenarios here. First could be a person who's experiencing narcissistic abuse who simultaneously also has clinical depression. So literally both processes are happening. Or there can be a person who's experiencing narcissistic abuse and some depression associated with that narcissistic abuse only, but they're not having clinical depression. In a person experiencing narcissistic abuse who also does not have clinical depression happening at the same time, but who also looks a little depressed, as we would expect in narcissistic abuse, one thing we notice is that when the narcissistic abuse is turned off for a little while, for example, they don't have to see or talk to the narcissist or the narcissists in their lives, perhaps they are spending time with people they like and the narcissist isn't there, or they're doing something that they enjoy and again, the narcissist isn't involved. For these people who are experiencing narcissistic abuse, but they also don't have clinical depression, we may actually witness them having laughter at a fun moment when the narcissist isn't around, or enjoyment of what the person is doing when the narcissist isn't around. Again, all these fun things happen in the absence of the narcissist. There's actually joy. That is more consistent, again, with how depressed symptoms would behave in people who are experiencing narcissistic abuse. When the narcissist isn't there, and the more time there is away from the narcissist, there's an increasing capacity for enjoyment and happiness. But when the person is dealing with the invalidation, the gaslighting, the manipulation, the devaluation, and the cruelty of narcissistic abuse, and the awareness that there is nothing they can do to change the narcissist, not surprisingly, a person kind of feels depressed. Remove the narcissist, and then a person enjoys life in those moments. Now, that is not how depression works. Depression doesn't budge. So, if a person is experiencing narcissistic abuse and they have depression, even in those passing narcissist-free moments, a friend's birthday, a couple of day vacation with friends, a day alone with the children, the sadness, the despair, the helplessness, the hopelessness, the tearfulness, and the lack of pleasure, even when the narcissist isn't there, they're all present almost all of the time. The more severe the narcissistic abuse, though, the more likely the depressive symptoms will hang around, even for a few days after the narcissist may not be around. But I must say, I have worked with clients who are experiencing some of the worst narcissistic abuse I've witnessed from very, very malignant narcissists. But during sessions with me, we would still laugh. They might share a story about a fun lunch out with friends, and then they would simultaneously acknowledge how bleak life would be when they had to be with the narcissist. But the more severe the narcissistic people in a person's life, and the more that the narcissistic people are present in aspects of the person's life, the more consistent the depressive symptoms are. So I hope that makes sense. There's, again, that severity and that exposure. If you don't get a break from the narcissist, you're going to feel depressed more often than not, right? So in one scenario, let me lay it out as a scenario. It may be a situation in which a person works for a narcissistic boss or works with narcissistic colleagues. The person may hate work and fantasize about a life without that job. And they may feel really happy at the thought of that. But they would feel sad if it's not easy or possible to leave the job. If this was a person who was clinically depressed, a clinically depressed person would not be able to envision the joy of the life without the job. They wouldn't even be immersed in that sense of happy fantasy. If it's a family of origin or your own adult children, if you are stuck seeing them every day, then the impacts will be worse. But let's say, for example, you live far away or you only need to deal with them periodically. You may find that being with them brings you down to the point of feeling depressed. But once you are away from them again, you feel better. That tends to be more of the pattern we see in narcissistic abuse. It's like you only need your umbrella when it rains, but when they're not around, it's a perfectly sunny day. As a survivor of narcissistic abuse, I can attest to the truth of this. When I am not being actively narcissistically abused, my mood actually lifts pretty quickly. I start to enjoy again what I'm doing. I might laugh heartily. But on days, weeks, or months, or periods of my life when the narcissistic people are really in my face, my mood perceptibly shifts. That ability to have those big laughs and pleasure from life and a sense of hope that you would have in a life when the narcissistic people aren't around is always a reminder to me of the difference between clinical depression and the depression that accompanies narcissistic abuse. This, however, is not a diagnosis or an assessment you should be making for yourself. Depression is a very serious illness, and left untreated can have impacts on not only your mental health, but your physical health. And it is a very treatable mental health issue. The earlier you get it, the better. If you are having symptoms and patterns of depression, and they are interfering with your ability to be able to take care of yourself, take care of other responsibilities you have, other caregiving responsibilities you have, to participate in your relationship or in your work or to be able to go to school, please see a mental health professional or other healthcare professional ASAP to be evaluated, even if it is the depression associated with narcissistic abuse. It's still very important to get it assessed, because in some cases, if the narcissistic abuse, you're always with the narcissist, you can't even get more than a few hours away, or it doesn't stop, or it keeps happening, or with more people, or whatever, and a person just can't get a break from it, the continuity and the stress of the narcissistic abuse and sort of the associated depression of the narcissistic abuse can actually put a person at risk of developing actual clinical depression. We can put some resources in the video notes just on depression for you. Narcissistic abuse is a stressor. Remove it, and most people experiencing straight narcissistic abuse without other clinical disorders or mental health issues improve. Their mood and their anxiety, they really do improve. If even when the narcissist is not around, your anxiety and your mood symptoms do not budge, then it really may be the interplay of experiencing both narcissistic abuse and a clinical disorder such as depression. Again, only a licensed healthcare professional can help you really definitively make that determination, and it's critical that you ensure that you find that out and don't just say, oh, this is just about my narcissistic abuse. Now, recovery from narcissistic abuse is slow. It takes a while to grieve, to adjust, to address the trauma bonds, to break out of the cycles of self-blame. So even when the narcissistic relationship is over, feelings of sadness and low energy and worthlessness will often persist, and hopefully those moments of laughter and joy start creeping into life more and more. And this is a good opportunity to remind all of you that we have a healing program starting in January, and the conversations like this about depression and all of that will be part of the conversation of that program. So please do, got the link, and we have a link for you to send your email in the video notes. Just check out the video notes. I never know what I'm talking about there, but we can give you more information on that, again, starting in January. And as always, thanks for watching these videos. Please subscribe. It's a great community. I hope you're learning. I learn from your comments too. Thanks again.